Hey, what's up? Welcome to episode 3. Again, super excited that you all are here and joining us on this journey. Today, we're going to talk about the Enneagram. The Enneagram has started it all for me. It's a personality type assessment, not one that you're probably familiar with. It isolates your core person, like who you are as a person, and then also shows you the negative sides of your personality. It doesn't focus on the negative sides, but it does identify some negative characteristics you have when you're under stress or anxiety or those types of mindsets, and allows you to identify them so that you can start to change those mindsets and become a better version of yourself. It's pretty awesome. I'm super excited to go over it. So without further ado, I got Tim here with me, and we're going to go ahead and jump right into it. Welcome. Mental health is a big thing, and we all struggle with it. If anybody says they don't, it's either because they've gone through it before or they're lying. Progression, not regression. Be better than you were yesterday, and you will always be in a state of progression if you live that way. All right. Well, welcome. Tim, how was your week, man?
It was good, had that ice storm out here in the Midwest. I'm sure some of our listeners may have experienced it. So, did a whole lot of nothing while the roads were icy and the whole ground was icy. And then this weekend, I was able to marry some of my friends. Got to minister a wedding. It was a lot of fun. Spent all day at their venue with my wife and kid. Long day, but it ended up being a lot of fun. Uh, it was great. Would do it again. Would do it again for sure. How was your week?
It was pretty testing. I'll say that. I'll talk a little bit more about it later, but I lost my special friend, my one and only, my support dog. He suddenly had to be put down, and I was I was really tested this week. I put it out on my social media that that's something that I was going through, and a lot of what I've been learning in the past couple of weeks came into play to help me get through that. But yeah, I'll talk more about that later on this week. Other than that, it was pretty good. I connected with some friends. That was pretty awesome. There's a lot of mental struggle out there this week. I saw with some of my personal friends, so I had to reach out to them. But let's get back to this ordainment, Shar. You're ordained?
Yeah, it's real easy, real easy. It's free. There's a website called universallifechurch.net,
Hey, that's where I got
and
ordained.
yeah, and they ordain you for free, and you only have to pay them money if you want a certified, like a certificate and a really cool little press pass placard, or a minister pass placard, excuse me, and then they give you a little card that's laminated and all that kind of stuff. It's really neat, and that was like $30.
Man, how
But
so?
yeah,
So how was that experience with marrying your friends? Was it?
so
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, it was unexpected. So of everything I was nervous about happening, like stumbling over lines, I have a slight stutter, so I was worried I was going to stutter. I was worried I was going to be too inebriated because we were partying before, like all the groomsmen and me, we were all like getting ready and having fun and like drinking some beers and playing video games and stuff. So I was like, oh well, I can't get too inebriated because I want to be able to I have to like talk in front of 170 people. And so I like of all the things I was nervous about happening, none of that happened. I'm 10 lines in to the script and I start cracking and getting emotional while I'm reading for the two people getting married. So I'm up there trying not to cry for people that are getting married, and I'm not even the one getting married. So that was the hardest part. Was I've never been emotional in front of a group of people, and the last thing on my mind at the time was getting emotional, and then just out of left field, I get smacked in the face with my own emotions. But besides that, it was still a beautiful wedding. We were underneath this 300-year-old oak tree.
Wow.
The theme for the groomsmen was Spider-Man, and the theme for the bridesmaids were witches because it was on Halloween. Like the wedding was on Halloween. So my buddy got married dressed as the Spider-Man from Into the Spider-Verse, who was the fat Spider-Man wearing sweatpants. So he wore sweatpants to his own wedding while his wife, his bride to be, was in a really expensive Glinda the Good Witch outfit. It was so funny.
That's
Wore sweats
fantastic.
to his own wedding. He dressed down to go to like get married and then put real clothes back on.
Well, if like to me, that's like planning it perfectly. You know what I mean? Like
Oh yeah.
if you can go to your own wedding in sweatpants, you've won. You know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah.
Like,
Ultimate comfort out there in some West Texas heat.
oh
It was
man.
actually a pretty cool day. It was 5 o'clock in the afternoon. It was nice. It was
Yeah, I
like
was gonna say
70 degrees
yesterday wasn't
outside.
too bad.
Yeah, it was definitely real comfy.
That's fantastic. I ordained one wedding, and you know who it was. I don't know if you were there, but yeah, it was a wonderful experience for me. Which is why I was asking. I was just kind of curious as to what your experience was. My experience was really interesting. Because obviously I knew everybody there, so I was pretty comfortable. Just not a lot of people saw me in that light. So that part was nerve wracking for me, but everybody sat so far away from the bride and groom when we were doing the ceremony that I didn't know if I needed to speak loudly for everyone to hear or just loud enough so that the bride and groom can hear me. So everyone had like their cameras and their video cameras, but like we were so far away and it was windy that I was like, dude, like, do I yell so that like they can hear me? Do I stay quiet so that only the bride and groom can hear me? Well, I don't know if I chose the right choice, but I ended up yelling. I was just like, "And today," I don't know if the family probably wants to hear me, but like I can see it in the bride's face. She was like, "Man, you're kind of loud." I'm like, I'm so sorry. But other than that, it was fantastic. They didn't complain. They said I did great. So it's probably
Yeah.
more me over criticizing myself than anything. But yeah, it was a fantastic time. I love doing it. That was my first time and my only time. I almost got signed up for a second one. My wife almost signed me up for a second wedding with her friends, but they ended up moving back home, so that got canceled. But yeah, it was interesting. So that's pretty cool, man. It's awesome.
Yeah, it was definitely fun. I did some research before I went out there, and like the one of the main points was people aren't going to remember if you were good. They're only going to remember if you were bad. So like and then they were and like everywhere I was reading was like you have to try to be bad. So if you're not trying to be bad, no one's going to remember who the minister was. They're only going to remember the moment of the two people getting married, and that made me a lot less nervous. I was just way more nervous about stuttering or like stumbling through lines and stuff. I mean, I was up there holding he wanted me to hold a D&D player's guide. So I was dressed up. I had like a tie tab and
No,
everything for like the minister tie tab, and then I was holding a D&D player's guide book with my script tucked into it. So it was like whole 9 yards when it came to like it being as nerdy as possible. It was great.
that is awesome. All right, man. Well, let's get into it. The Enneagram, man. Yeah, this is kind of where it all began for me. I was literally, like I said in my intro, the episode one, who I am as a person. When me and my wife were on that edge where like it was almost over. You know what I mean? Like she was fed up with how I was being and how I was, and I was a lot worse than I thought I was, and so I had to do a lot of internal digging. And one of the things she did was she sent me a link on a week where she just did not want to talk to me at all. She wouldn't tell me she loved me, nothing. I was devastated. I was heartbroken, and she sent me a link and said, "Hey, you need to take this. You need to start this journey." And so it was a link to the Enneagram that I actually included in the link on our Instagram page, and I believe I also put it on the Facebook group page. If I haven't, I will today. But yeah, it started it all for me. I took the Enneagram, and I'm a Type 7 with a Wing 6, and I opened up the audiobook because I'm an audio learner, and so I listened to the audiobook called The Road Back to You, and just mind blowing, completely mind blowing. What's your number, Tim?
So yeah, I did the test when we started discussing doing this podcast. You were talking about it, and I was like, that sounds real interesting. I've taken personality tests before. Or I've not, well, not really personality tests, but I've done those kind of things like the Facebook or the MySpace or the what color are you? Are you a blue, green, orange, or whatever? That kind of things we do in our job fields.
Right.
So I did the Enneagram, which was the first time I've ever done something like this. I mean, it was like 36 questions. It took me about 15 minutes to go through it, and I took it seriously. I didn't like answer some of the questions the way I feel I should answer those questions. It was like well, I want to do it one way, but I know that I don't do it that way. So I would change my answers to be more reflecting of me, and so I got the type two, and the way you were just explaining it, my wing because we were just talking about this a little while ago, my wing would be a type 6. So I got the type 2 supportive advisor. And after reading through it and doing some of my own research on it, like it does make a lot of sense. Like 99% of the time, I'm kind of a type 2. Like, or not kind of, I'm very much a type 2.
Well,
I mean,
actually, I think what we had talked about was that you'd be a type 2 wing 1 because the wing 1 or the
sorry, wing 1. Yep,
yeah,
wing 1. Not, yeah,
totally fine.
not 6, excuse me. Yeah, wing
Yeah.
1.
So that that's actually pretty awesome. One thing I wanted to point out, like you said when you took the test, was that you, even though like as you read the questions, your mind kind of wants to read it and say, "Oh, you would or you want to do this," and you'd answer it like, who you want to be, essentially. But in reality, this is probably one of the first assessments that I've taken where I had to get out of my current emotional state and really focus on like me as a person, when it asks you how you would respond in a certain situation, I would have to think back to like my whole life, as a kid, as a high school student, as the first days in my military career, all those areas, and say how would I really respond in this situation, not right now where I'm trying to kind of save my marriage or whatever it would be, and say, oh well, I'm such a loving person, and I'm trying to be that because I want to be that. I'd have to really think like, have I really been a loving person? Have I really sought to impress those around me, or whatever the question was asking, because there's a lot of pretty
Yeah.
deep questions in there. And you really had to think about it. And I think that's a good point that you made is, you, you can't take this assessment and go to, hey, this is what I want to be like, or what I'm hoping to, aspire to be. Like you have to really answer it honestly and say like, man, like this is actually how I am. And sometimes the truth is hard. It's a hard pill to swallow, especially when you're answering it about yourself, because true accountability is your own accountability on yourself. And so you really have to do that with this assessment in order to get accurate results, and then start a true path to self help through the Enneagram. This is the path that you choose. So yeah, that's what I had to do, and I'm glad that you pointed it out because that's so true.
Yeah, like I can't remember some of the exact questions, but there was definitely questions where I was like, I would answer it for like who I thought I was, and then I was sitting there and I was like, but that's not actually what I do in practice. Like I have this vision of who I am, and then there's this vision of who I actually am, and they kind of tend to conflict. And that was probably the hardest part with that Enneagram is I was going through that Enneagram and I was like, ouch, some of these questions hurt. Like some of these, well, not like not hurt, but they were like a little bit more than I was expecting when it comes to answering questions.
Yeah, it definitely gets deep. Um, so yeah, that's yeah. When I first took it, like I said, I was going through this process with my wife where we were in a very broken place, and so she had just told me that I'm very black and white when it comes to our relationship. I'm hot and cold. One minute I'm a lovey dovey, next minute I'm stressed and just don't like disconnected. And she's like, you need to figure this out. And so obviously in that state, I'm trying to defend myself, when she tells me that. I'm like, no, I'm very lovey. I'm always, lovey-dovey, so on and so forth. I'm very romantic, Watch a rom-com. I am that guy, And so when I'm taking this survey for the first time, I took it. I'm like, it would ask me one of those questions like, are you a relationship type person? Do you stay committed to the long haul, and are you broken up or are you devastated when the breakups happen? I'm like, yes, yes, absolutely, I am that romantic type. And then when I sit there and think about it, I'm like, man, I have been very disconnected. I find myself when I struggle and when I'm stressed out, I disconnect myself from my relationship and focus on the future state or what I, would rather be doing, which I find joy in, and it kind of takes myself away from that pain that I'm feeling. And I had to answer that very accurately and reassess and say, man, no, I don't actually, you know, want to fix or focus on this relationship. I tend to want to run away when it gets tough or difficult. And those are very hard questions to answer. But once I was very accurate, as you know, if you, as the listeners, the audience, if you guys go and read this book called The Road Back to You, you'll see that that's a very type 7 thing to do, running away from pain. And once I identified that, I was like, man, wow, So, yeah, so first off, very very good point is being true to yourself and answering the questions very very accurately. So a lot of the notes that I've taken over time come from the book, The Road Back to You. It's a fantastic book. I got it as an audiobook. Correction, my wife got it as an audiobook, and then she told me to read it or listen to it. And it's got a lot of very good information. Um, Full disclosure, this Enneagram is actually a faith-based assessment, uh, but I want to be clear that there's a lot of very good, very accurate information in here. So if you're not a Christian or if you're not faith-based, don't let that be the reason you don't take this assessment or read the book, because there's a lot of very, very good information in here, whether you have that faith based relationship with God or Jesus or whatever you might believe. So don't let that be a reason turn this episode off and move away, because there's a lot of very good information in here. And one thing I want to say that comes from the book is it says, before we can become who we really are, we must become conscious of the fact that the person we think we are here and now is merely an imposter and a stranger. So, a lot of the times, and that goes back to answering those questions, a lot of the times the person we think we are, or the person that we, have in our head that we are, is a vision of who we want to be, but not who we really are. And that's kind of why I got into the hot seat with my relationship, was because I was painting this picture that I was this amazing husband, I was amazing, XYZ. And don't get me wrong, I did make mistakes, but I wasn't the worst out there, and of course that's me trying to save my my image. But you know, I was making a lot of mistakes and I wasn't catching them because I was painting this picture of myself and finding myself to be or wanting to be that. And so it wasn't until I actually read this book and took the Enneagram that I was, shown, hey, who you think you are isn't always who you actually are. And that's the cool part about this Enneagram, is it brings those things that are in the dark to light and really shows you, you know, who you should be. You know what I mean? Like who you really are, and then the things that you do in the dark. And it's awesome. So definitely go take the assessment. Link is in the bio on the Instagram. Instagram, catch my six.
Yeah, and
Go
oh,
ahead. No, go ahead.
well, just to just further hit on that point, as we would say, piggybacking, uh, it is that whole test is faith based, but there's nothing. It's doesn't push anything. It's not like, hey, if you want to know more, you need to come to this church or you need to donate this money. It's all based on like the nine passions and stuff like that. It was all developed back in like the 50s. It's an older style of testing things, but it's pretty held true to psychology. Uh, I mean, I've seen a therapist before, as you guys heard from the last week's podcast. I mean, me and my wife were in therapy for over a year, and that between that test I took online and actually talking to a therapist, a lot of it hits like actual psychological uh, like rules and like values and stuff, like stuff that you will learn from an actual therapist, and like therapy isn't faith based. So like even though some of this stuff is like faith based, it's not so much that they get it because the Bible says one thing, it's because it's how our brains work and what our minds want to do kind of thing, and how we help how we protect ourselves from trauma. And not everybody does that in the same way, so that's why there's like 9 different personality types, because each of these types has a different way of protecting itself from trauma kind of thing. And then which is why there's the wings, like Casey was talking about. Like you could be a type 2, but then there's a wing that you could be 2 other types that you kind of like fluctuate into, but you always have like your core type. So I mean, I thought it was pretty good. It's definitely accurate. It represents who I am. It represents who Casey is. So I don't think it's just a fluke. And again, like I was saying, it's definitely stuff based on psychological theories and stuff I saw in my own therapy sessions with a counselor. So it's not just some hoity-toity snake oil peddling nonsense.
Yeah, so um, I really appreciate you saying that, because I think that that just provides a understanding that the concepts here are applied in several different realms other than just, faith. But either way, it applies to both kinds of people, faith or religious, or not. So yeah, highly encourage you to take that assessment. Another cool thing that the book actually says that's very accurate is the purpose of the Enneagram is to reveal your shadow side and offer spiritual counsel on how to open it to the transformative light of grace. So again, that's a faith statement there. But just looking at it and kind of dissecting it, the purpose of the Enneagram is to reveal your shadow side. So if you look at it that way, right, a lot of these personality tests will tell you, like, how great of a person you are and kind of pump you up. This one here shows your shadow side, kind of shows who you are in the dark, and allows you to identify that. A great example is as a 7, I try my best to avoid pain. If I'm going through a situation that I'm very uncomfortable with, like grieving, like I have this past week, actually the past 2 weeks, grieving, or anything that has to deal with like heavy emotion, like sadness, whatever it might be, I try and find a way out. I try and distract my mind. I try and get away from that. And it's a big example of that is constantly thinking of the future. And so I used to do that a lot, where if me and my wife were having trouble, or I was having trouble at the house, or I was really stressed out with the current situation I'm in, I would think of, what, like, where do I want to PCS next? Where do I want to go? And for military people, they know what that means. For you civilians, PCS is just like, which job do I want? Like, what location do I want to go to next? Or like think about retirement, like, hey man, in retirement, like, it's not going to be like this is what I want my retirement to look like. And I start painting this beautiful picture of what life could be in the future, so on. And I lived there until I realized, and I snapped myself out of it, that I've been there for 5-10 minutes just sulking in what could be. But the reality of it is, if I don't change who I am today, right now, that's causing all of these issues in my relationships, with whether it be my wife, my coworkers, whatever. If I don't change who I am today, that picture of my future will never exist, because I'll still be who I am today, just in that future. Like, if you don't change who you are today, you're just going to carry that into the future. And so, me retiring on a bunch of land, so on and so forth. If I for instance, for example, I guess, with financial issues, right? If you sit here and you have nothing in the bank, and you're constantly spending money on dumb crap, and you think to yourself, like, man, one day I'm gonna be in this mansion on the beach somewhere. If you don't focus on your finances today and fix how you are managing money, you're never going to have that mansion on the beach. You know what I mean? Like, and the same goes for your mental state, for, your self growth. If you don't change the negative reactions you have to certain situations, you'll never respond differently to those situations. And if that is causing you to push your relationships away, if that's causing you to hinder your working relationships, your promotions, whatever that is, none of that's going to change. You have to look internally. And that's kind of what brings me to my next point, is the source of all your problems is you. And that is like a hard, hard statement to swallow and
Oh,
understand is,
yeah. Oof, woof. Why are you coming in that deep, Casey? Why are you coming in that deep?
right? I mean, and the cool thing is that's in the book, right? The Road Back to You. So again, read the book. Not sponsored. Let me just say that, I just find it to be a very good book. But yeah, the source of all your problems is you. And it's so hard to look at it that way because we always want to blame somebody else, you know. And again, as a seven, that's one of my, problems is I push the problem on somebody else. So when, my wife, as I mentioned in the very first episode, when my wife came to me and said, hey, I'm having all these issues with you, my first response was, well, hold on, like I am lovey-dovey. I am, there's always been love in this relationship. You're just the one who couldn't see it, and I'm immediately blaming her. But it wasn't until I fully sat down and thought about it and I was like, holy crap, man, like wow, I have been messing up. You know what I mean? Like I have been very black and white. I have been, disconnected. And that's just, how I've been. You know what I mean? And again, that's what this Enneagram pointed out. So I think wholeheartedly that this Enneagram is a great, great place to start. If you're looking for somewhere to start, somewhere to, begin your self-help and fully find a baseline for who you are as a person, I think this is a great, great place to start, because it pointed out a lot of things that, I did not know I was doing. So, like I said, um, you know, feeling sorry for myself. A seven in an unhealthy space, let me just say these things. Uh, a seven in an unhealthy space sees themselves and their environment as inadequate. So basically, like, this isn't good enough. I feel sorry for myself all the time. Um, like like I said, when my wife came and told me that I was the problem, my first response was like, you know, push it all back on her, and then tell myself like, hey man, it's okay, like like you're the one who's been suffering, you know what I mean, like you're the one who's been in pain this whole time, so on and so forth, and so it's this Enneagram has showed me that's what I was doing. And so when me and my wife were going through that situation and I started going down that road of feeling sorry for myself, casting blame on her. Another thing is addictive personalities. Now, I've never done like substance, abuse or addiction or anything else like that. But for me, my addiction was experience. Like I wanted to go experience new things. So what I would do is I would go out and I would spend ridiculous amounts of money to buy like video games and stuff like that, and immerse myself in a world that just doesn't exist, and then I would get addicted to that. So any time of the day that I was free from work and I didn't want to be present in the family due to stress or whatever it was, I would immerse myself in a video game to escape my reality. And so that's where the addictive personality for me lied. And then, another thing that the book points out is in an unhealthy space, I'm often reckless and risking more than I can stand to lose. And that is very true in the financial realm. By no means am I, financially unstable or anything like that, but I would spend lots of money in areas I just should not be spending money. And so this book has pointed all that out. If you take the survey online, that'll point it out as well, a lot of your unhealthy spaces and stuff like that. And once I was able to realize this, it actually helped me out a lot when I went through what I went through this past week. So 2 weeks ago, a friend of mine, it was probably more like a week and a half ago, week and a half, 2 weeks, a friend, a mentor, a guy that meant a lot to me, he took his life. And at first it was crazy to kind of see how my body responded, how like my initial response for that pain was, and it was literally like my mind started identifying all of the ways that him and I weren't close. For instance, he got out and went guard a long time ago. And, him and I haven't really reached out very much. Like we've reached out every once in a while. I would see a post on Facebook and comment, that kind of thing. And so my mind immediately highlighted that and said, hey, you weren't really that close, like it's not that big a deal. And, kind of tried to push off the feelings I had about the situation that, he was in, that his family was in, and that, a lot of his friends that he left behind, all that. And so I had to sit back and say, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. Like I recognized that my body was forcing that pain away and trying to get myself into a happy state, and that's what my number does, and that's what the survey pointed out. And so I literally sat there and I really thought, and I said, man, like, just wait a minute. Like he was a mentor to me, and in a time where I didn't think, ranks above the one I was at the time, actually took care of, us as airmen or anything like that. He came out and he took care of us. Like he changed my perception of leadership. He changed my perception of, the next rank, because that's what he was. He was the next rank, the one I was, working towards. And I realized, like, man, like I don't have to be this a-hole. I don't have to be, super hard on the people under me. And he kind of changed that for me. And, he was happy all the time, and he was always looking at the positive things in life, and he was always laughing, always making jokes. And the coolest thing about when I think back on him as a person and our experiences together, all I could do was laugh. Like I felt sad, but all I could do was laugh, and it made me happy. And then, let's go a week later, again, with that experience, I had to force myself to feel something. And I'm not going to lie, I found myself crying. I found myself in a really low place with the emotion, because I'd never really experienced that before. I never forced myself to feel that. And so I kind of forced myself into that. And it kind of opened up a way for me to feel what happened this past week. Tim, I know you felt that as well. You knew him, right?
Yeah, so we were deployed back in 2015 when that plane crashed, and so we were pretty close on that deployment. I almost got out of the military after the deployment, and he was like lining up a job for me up there in Seattle, because he got out
Wow.
about 6 months later. So he was getting me hooked up with some people in the Seattle area to go work at the same place he was working at. And I mean, and then me and my wife got pregnant, and it was a whole different kind of idea then. Or there was just some other stuff came up and I decided not to go. But he was my Secret Santa on that deployment, and he got me this really stupid golden gemstoned monkey eating a banana, and it's like the dumbest looking thing I've ever seen in my life. I couldn't stop laughing when I opened it because he was like, "Hey man, I didn't know what to get you," and I was like, "Bro, this is the funniest thing you could have gotten me. This is hilarious." I was like, because it was a $10 limit, and we could only get stuff from the bazaar, like no Amazon gifts. It was all like $10 limit from the bazaar. Here's your Secret Santas, go. So I wasn't even expecting. Yeah, Sharice just brought it over here. So it's the dumbest looking. Well, like I'll have to post it on the Instagram or something because it like opens up and like the first thing I did when I opened it up, he's like, "Hey man, you could put your weed in there," and I was like, "Oh my God, come on!" Like it was so silly, so silly. It was the dumbest thing ever. So yeah, I mean, we kept in touch a little bit after he got out because again, I was gonna go work up with them. I was thinking about getting out and going to work with him. And then I mean, as all things go with like the military, like you just lose touch with people. But that doesn't negate those feelings you could still feel for somebody. I mean, I spent a rough 4 months with him on that deployment. And then, I mean, I worked with him before the deployment, but he was in a supervisory role. He wasn't like a peer, so I didn't like hang out with him. But on deployments, it's a different game. So we got close on that deployment. He got out, stayed in touch a little bit, drifted apart. But I mean, it still sucks. It sucks to hear stuff like that because it's not. He was the last, like of all the people, you know. It was like he was always laughing. He was always smiling. He was making everybody else laugh, making everybody else smile. So it was just it was out of left field, and it was yeah, and it was rough. It was a hard week. Like it was just one of those things like you didn't even expect, and it's like across the country. Like there's not much we can even do. Like we can't go all the way up to Washington. Like
Yeah. Yeah,
There's not a lot we can do to help out.
I totally agree. My headset, actually, I posted about it. My headset. So for those of you who are listening, if you're a mechanic, or an aircraft mechanic, your headset, the one that you use to communicate on the aircraft, is like, you know, it's like a part of your soul almost. Like it's a rite of passage. Like all great crew chiefs have earned their headset. You know what I mean? And you try and stick with this one piece of equipment for as long as you possibly can because it's so special to you. And so mine, he drew a heart on it. I have it right here above my desk, but he drew a heart on it. And I remember at the time that he did it, I was looking at putting stickers on it. I was looking at painting it. I was looking at doing whatever because you try and make it yours. And he drew this heart on it, and I saw it. And at first, when I saw it, because I didn't know it was him, I just came back to my headset and saw a heart on it, and I was like, dude, like who did this? Like who would draw something so silly on my headset? And when I actually saw another person with it on their headset, I was like, dude, who did that? And so they told me. They're like, oh, it was so and so. And so I went and talked to him, and I said, hey, like what the heck, man? Like why would you draw on my headset? Like I was looking to do X Y Z with it. And he goes, hey man, uh, you know, excuse me, but he's like, what the fuck, dude? Like as he always said. And
Yeah, oh yeah,
yeah,
dude.
yeah, dude,
Dude.
And so I was like, dude, like, why'd you do that? And he goes, nah, don't worry about it, dude. And like, he's like, only special people get the heart on their headset. And I was like, whatever, dude. Like, thanks. And no shit. Like the few people I saw it on their headset, like there was you didn't see it, very often. And for the people you did see it on, it was like, okay, those were very special people. Like they were nice people, they were good people, and so I kind of felt almost honored that I had it on my headset. So when I found out that news, I actually, because my headset was here at work, when I found out that news, man, like I was like devastated. I was like, dude, like, because you're so right. Like the signs weren't there, and that's kind of something
Yeah,
that,
and I hate it.
yeah,
We teach, or not even teach. Well, yeah, like we're taught that they're gonna give away stuff. They're gonna like stop showing up to work. They're like there's all these quote unquote warning signs of someone that's going to kill themselves, and
yeah,
it's three. I've known three people, and all three people had no warning signs. So it's just
yeah.
it's horse hockey at this point, in my opinion. It's not. No one who's going to do that is going to give away their stuff. They're not going to be like, all right, I'm going to go give away my motorcycle. I'm going to go give away my CD collection. I'm going to go give away my video games. Like they're not going
However,
to
if
do
you
that.
do see that, ask
Yeah,
the questions. But I think
ask the
I think you're on the right
questions.
page. Go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure it does happen, but in my experience, it's never happened. Like it's typically like it's not plan. It's not planned ahead. They're not planning to do it tomorrow. They're not planning on doing it next week. It's something happens that day, and for them it's just they're like that's it, I can't. And I mean because like it's literally a mindset of they don't see any other way out of their emotional, physical, mental trauma. They don't see any other way out of it except for that final solution.
Yeah,
Like there's like that to them, the best course of action is taking their own life because they're in such a dark place that is the only choice left to them. And that doesn't come from planning. You're not going to plan to do that
yeah.
next week. It's
It's
just
hardly premeditated.
yeah, like you're going to wake up one day and it's like you're going to stub your toe, or someone's going to give you news, or
And it's just the
it's
straw that breaks the camel's
yeah.
back.
And it's at that point like you're just like today's the day, because today's the day. And it's that in my experience that's what it's been. So it's
Yeah, it's
just
my experience as well. I was actually when I worked as a dip monitor, and let me just say, all you maintainers out there listening, don't let that be a reflection of me as a mechanic. Uh, but anyways, I was doing dip monitor, and I was talking to the NCOIC of the shop, and man, like we would sit there and we would talk for hours about motorcycles, about, traveling. He was about to retire. We were talking about that. He wasn't about to retire, but he had like, 6 years or something like that. And we were just talking about that. Like, we were just chatting up all the time. Nice guy, man. Nice guy. Always laughing. Like, he sat 2 desks down from me, and like literally on lunch, he would, make some, silly joke, and, we'd laugh about it. He always had coffee at his desk, just dude was awesome. And I ended up getting out of DIT and going back to the flight line. And the day I went back, the first sergeant called and said, "Hey, do you know, so and so?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Can you come to my office?" I was like, "Sure." So I came to the office and they told me, and I was like, "What?" Like, he had no signs. Like, I just did the training. Like the training failed. He did nothing that the training set me up for. You know what I mean? Like, how can you help somebody who doesn't look like they need the help? So it's
Yeah, and that's the whole thing. Like we were talking about last week. It's like when I got asked in a hallway if I was doing all right, like when I was in a situation where there was signs of me being in distress, and but I was asked in passing if I was all right. Like you won't know when the people you won't always know when somebody needs a shoulder or needs an ear to listen to. Like you won't always know that, but then when you do see people that need that, like a hallway conversation isn't the conversation you have to have.
yeah.
Like it's the you pull them out after work, you pull them out before
Take them to
work, during
lunch.
work, you take them to lunch. Like those are the things you got to do. When you see those signs, it's not, oh, I'll get to that later. It's immediate intervention in the most polite, safe way you can.
So, yeah, I 100% agree. Let's kind of take it back to the grieving process, right, and kind of tie this all into the Enneagram. So, with the guy that I knew and did the NCOIC, I felt no emotion. Like, I my mind processed that as like I hardly knew him. I knew him for a month. Like, it really wasn't that big a deal. Like, for him and his family, it was a very big deal. I'm not downplaying that. I'm just, my mind pushed my emotions tied to that situation away, because that's just how I am. I didn't want to feel emotion. I just kind of, immediately started thinking of, things that I had to do around the house, something different, whatever, and kind of distracted myself from those initial feelings. But when, this a couple weeks ago, when our friend, passed away and took his life, I forced myself to feel those feelings, because out of respect and out of personal growth, I was like, I need to feel that, and so I felt it. And man, it was a couple of days where I just felt really down. I even talked to my wife about it. I was like, man, like I don't understand like why I feel so like groggy, so like, unwanting to, even help around the house. Like, I knew I had to, so I did, but it was like, man, like I feel like I'm moving so slow in a day that's moving fast. And she, kind of helped me like understand, like, hey, this is grieving. Like, that's grieving. You're grieving the person that you're, that you loved. Like, this person made an impact in your life, and you're grieving that person. And so I kind of forced myself to that. And then, kind of fast track, it helped me through this past week. My dog died, and I know a lot of people might not see dogs as something special, but he was truly something special. My wife and I, when we started to go into the fostering process, I felt really abandoned by my wife. And I know you guys probably think that's crazy, but, where her and I left for deployment, it was just her and I, and then I came back, we had 2 kiddos, and then she got pregnant with our third. And so, her time was not my time. It wasn't us time. It was her and the kids, and then I got what was left, and so I felt abandoned. I felt left out, which is completely wrong. I get that, but that's just how I felt. I'm being honest, and so I got myself a dog. His name's Duke, and man, he got glued to me, and he really helped me through a lot of tough times when I got into some dark places, when I was angry, when I was stressed, whatever, you name it. He would find his way to me, and if I was, really angry or stressed out, he would literally step in front of me and kind of like lean up against me to like stop me from moving, like to get me centered on the place that I was in. If he found me to be stressed and I was sitting on the couch, he would lay his head on my lap. He would put his head in my hand. Like he just made it known that he was there. And so this past week, it was totally unexpected. He had a medical condition that came out of nowhere. We literally were running one morning. That same day I came home from work, he was very ill. The day after, because I thought it was just a stomach bug or something. So the day after, we took him to the emergency vet, excuse me, and they said it was cancer, and they had to put him down. And so it just came out of nowhere, man. Like he had no signs of distress, no signs of sickness, no signs of anything. Like I said, we went on a run, we were having a good time, and then boom, gone. And so
That
I
that's
lost.
dogs though. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
They
So
they don't show pain in the way we show pain. And like we had a dog, my first dog when I was younger, that was the same thing. Like he found out he had bone cancer. He was 12 years old, and he just didn't move around as often, and we didn't think anything of it. And then like we went to give him a checkup, and they're like, he's riddled with cancer. And we're like, what do you mean he's riddled with it? And they're like, he's like, we don't know how he's still alive. Or like, he gets up and eats food every day and like runs around every now and they're like, yeah, but he's like, we don't know how he's still alive. And we're like, oh my God, like we felt horrible because we couldn't believe that we were letting our dog suffer. But like, dogs don't show it. They don't show the pain. They don't show the suffering. Like they're not designed to do that. Like that's not what dogs are. It sucks.
yeah, it was really crazy, because like you said, it just came out of nowhere. And again, the week prior when we lost our friend, it really set me up to kind of feel for my pup. And like I said, he was ride or die, man. Like that dog was everything to me. Or I'm not gonna lie, he was everything to me. And so it was very, very hard to handle that, even more so than when our friend took his life. And so all of these things that I learned through the Enneagram, I had to identify and practice. And it was it was crazy because the book itself, The Road Back to You, has what they call 10 paths to transformation. And it's just kind of 10 things that they suggest that you do to help you transform yourself from a negative state, the negative version of your number, to the positive side of your number, which the Enneagram actually identifies, the positive side of your number. So, as along with the negative side. So, the things that it tells me as my number, a type 7 to do, it says, daily practice of meditation to free myself from a tendency to, jump from one task to the next, or an overactive mind. And then also to journal. And so those two things there really helped me out, because journaling allowed me to express what I was feeling down on paper, instead of letting my mind just run rampant. And that's kind of what my mind was doing. And so through meditation and through journaling, that the Enneagram actually suggested I do, I found peace. I was able to express how I was feeling. I was able to kind of put down on paper. And a lot of times I do a vlog, because vlogging helps me more so than writing sometimes. And so I do that. And man, it really helped me out. And so the Enneagram itself helped me identify how I process things in a negative way, so that when this last week I started going through that, I really was able to kind of catch myself in that mindset and turn it around. So yeah, it was really cool. I would say that the Enneagram definitely helped me process the pain that I was going through. Like usually I would go out and spend tons and tons of money on just trying to escape into a video game, whatever. But I found myself actually processing the information. And if you know about stress itself and grieving as well is a cycle. It's cyclical. So you have to allow the process to complete itself before you can move on. And if you cut that process of stress or you cut the process of grieving off before it's finished, you're actually going to cause more harm than good. And so jumping into the path to transformation, the 10 steps, where I use journaling and journaling and meditation, it allowed me to cycle the grieving, cycle the stress, and now I'm on a healing process, and it's been extremely beneficial. Without the Enneagram, without identifying those parts and just telling you how I would have processed it before, I would either one, push the pain away, which inevitably it would come back, and then once it came back, I would either push it onto somebody else or handle it in a very addictive way, which would be to submerge myself into a video game to try and escape, and then show complete bitterness and aggression towards my wife, when she would probably come and tell me like, hey, you're not processing this healthy, like you're distancing yourself, you're not talking to me, you're whatever. And then I would just kind of tell her like, hey, you don't understand what I'm going through, and I'd be angry about it. But through the Enneagram, I've been able to identify those, the negative side of things, and I've been able to change it. And so I've handled it very well, and it's been great. So that's how the Enneagram has helped me in the most recent days. It's been great.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's like the whole purpose. So like the Enneagram worked for both of us because it identified it helped us look internally and see what was wrong with us when it comes to the ways we behave or uh, the ways we interpret trauma or the ways we interpret situations. It helped us identify those things that we can now work on. It may not work for you guys listening. There's other things out there to help you identify these things. It may not be the Enneagram. There's other things, and we'll get to those in other podcasts because again, that's the whole point, or other episodes. That's the whole point of this, is we're just trying to get information out there, talk about the things we're doing, we've done, just like being real and not just like talking about these things in some kind of like ethereal idea of what we want. Like this is just like us going through these processes and then talking about these processes to you guys who are wanting to listen about it. So the Enneagram worked for me and Casey because it already hit on notes that I kind of was aware of because of the therapy I'd been through. And some of it's kind of difficult to read because it's like it's reading about things about you that you may know but don't want to acknowledge that you have problems with, because nobody wants to be told they're wrong. Nobody wants to hear that. Everybody assumes they're the best and they're perfect, and there's nothing to do to fix that or to fix them because they're already perfect. And the Enneagram is going to show you that you're not and that you have to fix yourself. And so that's what the Enneagram did for us. And if it doesn't work for you, that's fine. There are other things out there. If you are trying to make a difference and you are trying to become better and you are trying to progress, there are other things we'll talk about in other episodes, or you'll hear us talking to somebody who talks about their story that may have something click for you, and you're like, "Hey, oh my God, that's exactly what I'm looking for." So don't just be like, "Oh, I can't listen to you guys anymore because the Enneagram isn't what I'm about." Like, don't worry about that. There's other things. Like, it's all just about us talking and trying to break that stigma of talking about mental health.
Yeah, you're definitely right. There's definitely so much more than just the Enneagram. Um, and a lot of other practices helped me out this past week and prior to, but I wanted to focus on the Enneagram today. To kind of close it up, because I know we're really pushing time here. To close it up, I want to just say two things that the book also mentioned. So one of the paths to transformation, for me, it says give yourself a pat on the back when you feel emotions like anxiety, sadness, frustration, envy, or disappointment. It says without running away, like when you feel those things without running away, because that's a sign of growth, right? So that kind of helped me out this past week, because usually I was trying to run away from those feelings, and I didn't. I embraced them, and so that was just really cool for me. One last thing, and this is more of a caution, a wake-up call, if you will, to anybody listening. The Enneagram, the author of this book says that once you know your Enneagram number, it takes away any excuse you might have for not changing sorry for not changing, because now you know too much to say that this is just the way you are and you're just going to deal with it. Like, basically, this is who I am, and just deal with it. Like telling the people around you, this is the person that I am. You're just going to have to deal with it, right? Once you learn your number, like, it takes all those excuses away. And more so, once you learn other numbers, it allows you to communicate with those numbers a lot better. Once I found out my wife's number, I learned about her number, and I was able to communicate to her a lot better, understand what she was going through a lot better, and be able to adhere to her, like be present without trying to fix the situation, things like that. So this Enneagram applies so much more than just you as a person. It applies to your relationships. It applies outwardly to anyone you come in contact with. And so I'll highly recommend it as a baseline, if nothing else. And if this isn't your cup of tea, that is totally fine, because there's plenty other things, like Tim said, that you can do for self-help. And we'll get into those into later episodes. But that's it for me. Tim, you got anything else?
No, I think it was a good episode. It's definitely the Enneagram is something to check out if you are trying to progress in your mental health, your spiritual health, anything like that. It's definitely a good starting place because there are a lot of resources out there related to the Enneagram. There are non-faith based resources around the Enneagram. They're not hard to find. It's just a short Google search away. Um, but you can't be expected to fix the problem if you yourself aren't ready to identify that problem. So if you aren't willing to take those first steps to try to get yourself better or try to make yourself better, then you're never going to make yourself better until you can identify what needs to be fixed. So highly recommend the Enneagram. Highly recommend any kind of self progression style or technique or anything like meditation or running in the morning or anything like that. Just make those personal progressive steps.
Absolutely. Well, we are super proud of every single one of you for listening to this episode. Thank you for staying all the way through. It was definitely a cycle. It was kind of hard for me to talk about, and I'm sure Tim experienced the same thing. But we're very proud of you all for showing up, for taking this dive into our journey and the Enneagram with us. Great job taking the first steps towards growth and sticking through to episode 3. Always progression, never regression. You can't change yesterday and you can't predict tomorrow. So all you got is today. If you are better today than you were yesterday, you'll always be in that state of progression, and that is where you want to be. So have a good night or day or whatever it is for you, and we'll see you next time on the next episode.
See y'all later.